Welcome to the Archive Network. I'm Aurelius. And with me, as always, Malik. We curate the conflict archive. Today we open a new file. AmericanCivilWar.com. Malik, you've had this one on your desk for a while. A hushed fear gripped America long before the first shot was fired. The signs were all around. In cotton fields and city streets, tension mounted. It was a nation splitting at the seams, waiting for the sky to break. The air was charged with a palpable dread, and no one could predict when or how the storm would come.
That fear wasn't just abstract. It was rooted deeply in the lives of millions. Enslaved people felt it daily, their lives tied to a system that enriched the South while shackling them in chains. The North, with its factories and railroads, was a world apart. Prosperity can't mask the cracks forming between regions, and slavery was at the heart of it all.
In Congress, the arguments turned vicious, almost primal. The Missouri Compromise and the Kansas-Nebraska Act were desperate attempts to hold the country together, but they failed spectacularly. Leaders like Stephen Douglas and John C. Calhoun weren't just clashing. They were waging ideological wars, each side refusing to give an inch. It was a spectacle of stubbornness, revealing how deep the divisions ran. We saw representatives shouting across the aisles, and it was clear. The nation was on a collision course.
And what did those debates really achieve? They only deepened the divisions that were already tearing the country apart. The Dred Scott decision in 1857 was a crucial moment in this struggle. It declared that Black Americans could never be citizens, stripping away their humanity, and claimed that Congress had no power to limit slavery in the territories. The North erupted in outrage, filled with anger and frustration, while the South celebrated this ruling, feeling vindicated in their beliefs and justifying their oppressive systems.
We see it time and again throughout history. Empires consolidate power, and in doing so, they stoke the fires of conflict. The headlines didn't just report. They ignited tensions, pushing every debate and disagreement closer to a breaking point. The battle lines were drawn with precision, and the nation now stood teetering on the precipice of war, caught in a web of interests and ambitions that felt all too familiar. We can almost hear the drum beats of impending conflict.
But those headlines were more than just news. They reflected real lives shattered by injustice. On the Kansas plains, pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers clashed violently. It wasn't just a conflict over territory. It was a struggle for the very soul of the nation. Bleeding Kansas became a grim reality, and neighbors turned into enemies over their beliefs.
Families fled in fear, leaving everything behind, clutching their children and what little they could carry. The scent of gunpowder hung heavily in the air, a constant reminder of the violence that was now so close, so personal. This wasn't some distant affair. It was unfolding right in their backyards. Each act of violence pushed the country closer to war, and the stakes grew higher with every single day. We watched as lives were shattered and futures dimmed, a grim reflection of what happens when power turns to chaos.
And in the shadows of those cities, a different battle raged. The Underground Railroad was a lifeline for many seeking freedom. Harriet Tubman risked everything to guide the desperate to safety. Each journey north was fraught with danger, and the stakes were life or death. This is the reality that often gets overshadowed by political debates.
The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 transformed the North into a hunting ground. Free Black families faced relentless anxiety, always glancing over their shoulders, fearful of being captured. Abolitionist homes emerged as beacons of hope, offering sanctuary amid this chaos. Freedom wasn't just a distant ideal. It was a daily, tangible struggle for countless individuals. Every moment was a battle against an oppressive system that sought to erase their humanity. This relentless pursuit of liberty shaped their lives in ways we can barely fathom.
But what does this really say about society? It highlights a deep moral crisis that we can't ignore. When Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860, it sent shockwaves through the South. Those in power whispered about secession, gripped by fear for their way of life. It wasn't just about politics. It was about people feeling their very existence was at stake. Families were torn apart by this dread, and the human cost was immense. We can't overlook that.
South Carolina moved first, voting to leave the Union in December 1860. It was the spark that lit the fuse. Each state that followed felt like a thunderclap, shaking the ground beneath us. The core of the nation was unraveling. Families faced impossible choices, torn apart between loyalty to their state or the Union. Some stood firm while others hesitated. Panic gripped Washington as President Buchanan, caught off guard, stumbled through his response. This was history unfolding, raw and unpredictable.
And that hesitation had real consequences for so many people. Federal forts stood isolated, their garrisons running low on food and ammunition. Soldiers waited, their faces lined with worry, unsure of what lay ahead. The air was thick with tension, a nation caught between dread and denial. You could almost feel the calm before the storm weighing down on everyone. It was a heavy silence, and deep down, everyone knew war was just around the corner.
All eyes turned to Charleston Harbor. Inside Fort Sumter, Union soldiers faced a dire situation, with supplies dwindling daily. Outside, the Confederate guns loomed like dark clouds, their presence a constant reminder of the growing threat. Each day brought them closer to a breaking point, as tension crackled in the air. The world seemed to hold its breath, knowing that the moment was near. We were on the brink, waiting for that first shot to ignite a conflict that would reshape the nation.
That's where we leave it for now. Part 1 of 5. American Civil War is far from done. If you are new here, we're Aurelius and Malik, curators of the Conflict Archive, part of the Archive Network. Part 2 drops soon.